the leader of a coalition group called the Nationalist Party. He was a charismatic man whose speeches attracted many to his cause.
中国千年来是世界上头一等的强国，那么为什么我们这个国家现在变成这个地步呢？这个是我们这个国民最想了了。我们是中国人，应该要赶快想想法子，怎么样来挽救？大家要醒醒醒醒。
Sun knew that the first thing he needed was an army to defeat the warlords and unite the country. He appealed to Western governments for money for his cause.
At the time, none of the imperialist countries wanted to help us. Only the Soviet Union wanted to help us. The Soviet Union had no friends in Asia, so they had to work with us. England and the other countries didn't want us to be united. It appeared the Soviet Union did want to help us. China had to be united, so of course we cooperated with them.
One condition of Soviet help was that the Nationalist Party allow members of the newly formed Chinese Communist Party to join. Sun agreed, and in 1924, the Soviets helped him set up a military academy just outside Canton. The Whampoa Academy quickly became a magnet for patriotic youth from all over China. Some were nationalists, some were communists. Some were not affiliated with any party. They trained for a military campaign that would one day unite the country, the Northern Expedition. Sun appointed his protege, Chiang Kai-shek, commander of the academy. Chiang was a professional soldier. Like many of his generation, he had attended military school in Japan. He had worked with Sun for over a decade. Chiang's son remembers what his father and Sun Yat-sen talked about.
Although I wasn't usually included in their day-to-day conversations, there were times when they were walking, having tea, when I heard them talking about national affairs. And when they talked about national affairs, they were very serious, very enthusiastic. They wanted to build up China, because in the East, we had lived under autocracy for too long.
Chiang was the commander of all the cadets and of the academy's staff. Many of China's future leaders were under his command. One of them was a young Communist Party member, Zhou Enlai. Zhou was the director of the political education department. Under his direction, the cadets watched and performed plays with simple political messages.
Without revolution, there was no hope for this country, so political education was given on the front. Songs played quite a big role. The song goes like this.
As his army trained, Sun and his wife Sung Ching-ling sailed to Beijing to negotiate with the city's warlord. But Sun was ill with cancer. He died soon after arriving in Beijing on March 12, 1925. In death, Sun was revered as the father of the Chinese Republic. There was no one of his stature to take over the leadership, and a struggle for power in the party began. Chiang Kai-shek emerged the victor. In June 1926, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Northern Expedition, the campaign to unite the country. A month later, the young army set out. Full of patriotic enthusiasm, they won victory after victory. In just 6 months, they defeated 34 warlords, and they swept up to central China.
All along the way, the people welcomed us. For example, they would boil water and cook sweet potatoes by the side of the road where our troops were passing. They would say, "Brothers, come and eat and drink. Help yourselves." The army was well disciplined then. And so the soldiers and the officers, they always paid for whatever they ate and drank.
When the Northern Expedition Army reached our region, they held mass rallies. Everybody went. At the rallies, speakers talked about the cooperation between the nationalists and the communists. They called for the defeat of the northern warlords and the imperialists, and they asked peasants not to pay land rent and debts. I didn't know much about revolutions then. I didn't know a thing about communism or opposing imperialism. But it seemed like a good idea to fight exploitation and the northern warlords.
Many in the Army's propaganda teams were communists. They explained the goals of the Northern Expedition, and they called for the end of many deeply ingrained social customs. Wang Ping soon joined the communists.
We knocked down Buddha statues in the temples. Foot binding was still popular where I lived, and we urged young girls not to bind their feet, and women who had already done it to undo their feet. At first, we didn't know better, and often we ordered people to do things against their will. If a young woman refused to cut her hair, several of us would hold her and cut it anyway.
I didn't know what they were up to, communism or whatever, but I saw that they made trouble. They tried to destroy our religion, our family system, and our ethical structure. For instance, young people's respect for the old. My father told me that the biggest fault of communism was that it was inhuman. So what seemed to be cooperation between the nationalists and the communists during the Northern Expedition was actually only our temporary concession.
So we wanted to purge the party, but it was a pretty dangerous thing to do. We could have been finished off. Both sides might move at the same time. The communists were all among us. The problem was how to do the purge.
Chiang planned to purge the communists when his army reached Shanghai. Here, communist workers, led by Zhou Enlai, had formed armed guards and taken control of the city. They were completely unaware of Chiang's plan to break them, and they eagerly waited for his army to arrive. Nationalist troops moved into Shanghai. Chiang struck on April 12, 1927.
About 1 in the morning, I saw some guys in plain clothes run over. Our guards asked them the passwords, and they began to shoot. We were already surrounded from all sides, and there were machine guns positioned at the intersections on the streets. They were standing there. Back at headquarters, all our weapons were taken away. They warned us, your workers' guards are disbanded. Go home and don't make trouble.
Chiang Kai-shek's army was in firm control of Shanghai. Communists and workers held a huge demonstration to protest the betrayal.
There were about 100,000 workers there. They marched down the street towards the machine guns, which fired. And immediately more than 100 people died. Many more were wounded. Many were injured. It was raining that day. Bashan Road was a river of blood.
I remember it was drizzling, and I saw many people lying in the mud, still moving. It was very sad. When they arrested us, they beat us with rifle butts. Yes, rifle butts. Some of us were hit on the head and were bleeding. Even then, all we said was, good. That was how we showed our defiance. So they hit us and we said, good, good, and we grit our teeth.
Chiang's purge spread around the country. Unions were closed. Communists and left-wing organizers were arrested. Thousands were executed. Only days after the purge in Shanghai, Chiang established a national government in Nanking. He now controlled China's economic heartland, and over the next few years, he expanded his control. The success of the Northern Expedition earned Chiang tremendous prestige, and he adopted the title Generalissimo. Chiang had made himself the heir to Sun Yat-sen. He strengthened this position by having Sun's body brought to the new capital in an epic journey. He married Sun Yat-sen's sister-in-law, Sung Mei-ling. She came from a wealthy Methodist family. She had gone to school in the United States, and her English was excellent. Her charm was a valuable asset to Chiang, for he was a difficult, aloof man who gained respect, but not affection. To many, especially in the cities, it seemed a new era was beginning. People were more open to the West than ever. Chiang's government began modernization programs.
The modernization is the way we keep our ancient traditional virtues, but we adopt Western technologies. and Western modern social science in a way that brought to the poor. Specifically, I noticed the medicine, the building of new hospitals.
It was a time of construction. Transportation and communications were modernized. The currency system began to be unified. Education was expanded. Chiang Kai-shek appointed Chen Li-fu a top advisor.
I organized and modernized the party. We made it impossible for the communists to operate. I used American techniques. They used Soviet techniques.
Vast security organizations were set up. A top priority was to prevent renewed communist growth in the cities where remnants of the party had gone underground. Shen Zui worked for the security police.
We knew they were communists by their speeches, their posters, or the articles they wrote. Or if we searched their homes, we'd find communist papers. That was the correct way. But if we had doubts, we'd say, better to kill an innocent one by mistake rather than let a bad one go. After all, they were fighting the nationalists for power.
In spite of the security police, the communists began to rebuild support in cities where working conditions were often brutal. In factories, child labor was common. In silk production, very young children worked plucking cocoons from boiling water.
I came to Shanghai when I was 12. We were so miserable. You had to work 17 hours a day. Later, a progressive worker in the factory told us that people were not born to be poor. One was poor because of the exploitation by others. There is exploitation by the capitalist on one hand, and exploitation by the labor contractor on the other. You do the work, and he takes the money. I had no idea what revolution meant. All I thought was that the worker made sense, and that he cared about us poor people. Well, he said, there is a country where there is no oppression and no exploitation, where everybody has a job and food. All we dreamed of then was of having food. So when we heard of this country, we wondered where it was. If only our country could be like that. That's what we hoped for. So we liked to listen to him, and we felt we could do whatever he told us. We would follow him, even if we had to risk our lives. What country was that? He wouldn't tell us which country it was. It wasn't until later we knew that what he referred to was the Soviet Union.
Chung Tai-sing has been a breeder of champion pedigree chow chows for 7 years.
I've always fed.
But a small group in the party believed the key to revolution lay in the countryside, where most of China's people lived. This renegade group was based in Jiangxi province. It was led by Mao Zedong. Mao came from a prosperous peasant family. He was a founding member of the Communist Party. He had worked with the nationalists at the military academy in Canton, training students to organize peasants. After Chiang Kai-shek's purge, Mao returned to the countryside. By 1927, he and a small group were organizing peasants in Jiangxi province. Conditions made the area a fertile ground for communist activities.
家道一旦往上啊喽，家道宽来3分水，本老高少离高多，挂条我来有万珠子，半条珠子是毛骨朵，丢条我连毛米珠，找一个里拽戳戳，就等10年天换地都是蛮难啊过。
In South China, there were huge gaps between rich and poor. Rents were high, and taxes were often collected decades in advance. Landlords were called the masters of the earth.
One of the 4 tyrant landlords, by the name of Joe, came to our house and saw my 15-year-old sister and took her to be his wife. He not only wanted to take my sister, he also wanted me to be his maid. I was only 7. My father refused, so he demanded 1,000 silver dollars to buy a maid instead. My father didn't know what to do. Rather than let me be a maid, my father sold me as a child bride.
People told me if I joined the revolution, I would have my freedom. I could choose who I wanted to marry. If I didn't join, I'd have to marry this man who was over 30. So I thought if revolution could save me from this, I would join.
The communists organized peasant associations and began social reforms. Their actions unleashed pent-up hatred of local landlords, and violent class struggles soon erupted.
We smashed the landlord's opium pipes and took away his grain and clothes. He started looking for his money. The landlord wasn't home. His wife was hiding in the attic where rice straw was stored. We found her. We questioned her for several days, and then we killed her. We gave the grain to those who had nothing to eat. Some got about 50 pounds, some got 100. We gave the clothes to those who just didn't have any, so the poor were really eager to join us.
By 1930, the communists had set up a government in Jiangxi. Mao had joined forces with Zhu De, another veteran revolutionary. Their men formed the Red Army, which Liu Hanshao joined.
I often saw Chairman Mao. He was tall and thin. When he went out, he rode a white horse. We didn't have cars then. When he went to work, he would be followed by 8 security guards, 3 to carry lanterns and 2 to carry his lunchbox. He wouldn't eat in someone's home. He took his meals wherever he went. Sometimes when there was a meeting, he would stand on a mound and shout slogans. He would shout, "Advance to Nanjang! Advance to Nanking! Take Chiang Kai-shek alive!"
Although the communist area was relatively small, many nationalists were frightened by the violent events there. Chiang Kai-shek was concerned. The people under attack, the middle and upper classes, were the base of his support. He launched a series of military campaigns in Jiangxi. They were defeated.
Our main forces would lure their troops, lure them into the mountains, like we did in the battle at Longgang. We would lure them in and then pull back. This is called pulling back your fist before you strike. It was like drawing them into a bag. And suddenly we'd surround them and wipe them out. Understand? We'd lure the enemy deep, deep into the Soviet area. and then suddenly surround them.
没有
We wiped out their 18th Division this way. All 9,000 of them, from the commander down to the cooks. Not one escaped. This is called mobile or guerrilla warfare.
Zhang's forces were defeated by these guerrilla tactics 4 times, but he continued to attack. In 1934, he launched an ideological offensive called the New Life Movement, a mixture of traditional Confucian values and European fascism. He hoped to create a disciplined and orderly society by reforming social behavior. People were instructed to button their clothes, stand straight, and not to eat noisily. The movement only reached a small section of the middle class and failed to solve the peasants' problems. But Zhang's 5th military campaign was a success. In an all-out effort, Zhang had gathered nearly 1 million soldiers and all the military machinery he could muster. And he changed tactics.
We adopted the tactic of moving step by step. The stronghold tactic, do you understand? For instance, I could walk 20 miles a day, but instead of 20, I would only do 10. Then I would stop and dig trenches and build blockhouses. Since the communists didn't have cannons, they couldn't take well-defended blockhouses. So our troops worked very hard to build them, and we wouldn't advance until a place was firmly in our control. This was how we tightened our stranglehold on the communists.
As the nationalists began their new tactics, the communists changed theirs.
That was when our party made one of its biggest mistakes, the biggest. What happened was that the Communist International sent an advisor, leader, whose original name was Otto Braun. He claimed that the golden age of guerrilla warfare was over and that it was now time to develop positional and regular warfare. When Mao heard this, he realized that he and Li De would never agree. And after that, Mao didn't go to any more meetings of the military committee.
Communist Party leaders supported Otto Braun, the German Comintern representative. Mao lost his position as head of the government, and his guerrilla tactics were abandoned.
Then we used blockhouse warfare to deal with their blockhouse warfare. It was tit for tat, but of course it didn't work. They had planes and cannons. We had nothing. So the communist area shrank and shrank.
The nationalists were winning. The communists had already lost much popular support because of their violent class struggle. By the summer of 1934, they were losing badly.
We were being killed off. The revolution wasn't plain sailing. There were people who wavered and were traitors. They saw the situation was going from bad to worse, and they changed with the wind.
Communist organizers were arrested by the nationalists.
A nationalist official wanted to bail me out of prison to force me to be his concubine. I didn't want to, but they threatened me, saying, if you won't, we'll put a firecracker in your vagina and light it. Aren't you afraid? Sitting or standing, I was just as tall as anyone else. Why should I be someone's concubine? I didn't want to, but what could I do?
Finally, they took a red-hot wire this long and forced it through my leg. One from this side, and then from that side. They put the hot wire through my leg. I still have the scars. I was hung up by the arms. I was tortured 3 times, and then they let me down. I was too numb to feel any pain. My interrogation went on from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Then they dragged me back to my cell and said, "Tomorrow we'll send a platoon of soldiers and rape you to death." That really frightened me. I wasn't afraid of being killed, but how could I stand being raped? Though they were just threatening me, they really made it look real. When I was taken out the next morning, there really was a platoon of soldiers waiting. The officer said, "Just look at those men. If you don't confess, you'll be raped to death, right here." I said, "I don't know who is a communist, and I'm not a communist leader. I'm just a laundrywoman." I didn't tell them a thing, and in the end, they sent me to the concentration camp at Zhejiang. They never got anything out of my mouth.
They're small, but dangerous.
Broke out of the nationalist blockade. They began a forced retreat which became known to the world as the Long March. For over a year, they walked an average of 17 miles a day, often through hostile territory. Nationalist troops chased them much of the time. The soldiers crossed 24 rivers and climbed 18 mountain ranges, and they walked more than 6,000 miles. For the survivors, it is remembered as one enormous battle going on forever.
By the time we got to the Xiang River, we had lost half our troops. We lost 30 to 40,000 people. They weren't battle casualties. We lost them on the road. We were on the march day and night. Everyone was complaining bitterly. We didn't know where we were going. Chairman Mao was out of power. He marched with the troops.
When they reached Zuni, meetings were held. Otto Braun and his supporters claimed that the nationalists had won because they were stronger. Mao said it was because Braun's tactics were wrong. For the first time, Zhou Enlai openly sided with Mao.
Zhou Enlai disagreed. Zhou did not think we had lost because of the enemy's strength, but because of our own strategic and tactical mistakes, since we had won in the past. Then Mao spoke. The atmosphere was calm. Everyone was reasonable. In the end, most decided that Li De and Bogu were wrong. Most people agreed with Mao's ideas and wanted Mao as our leader on the Long March.
We were so happy. We called an officers' meeting. We had a meal, 2 dishes. We were banging on the tables with our chopsticks. Yeah, banging on the tables. We were so happy we were dancing. We supported Mao. That's what it was like, I'm telling you.
The meeting was a victory for Mao and his belief in guerrilla tactics. He became the leader of the Long March, and soon of the entire Communist Party. Otto Braun lost his influence. From this time on, the Chinese Communists received virtually no help from the Soviet Union. The march went on. The soldiers continued to face the threat of relentless nationalist attack, and nature, which was often just as lethal. When they crossed the snowy mountains, most of the troops who came from the south were completely unprepared.
It was snowing, and there were hailstorms. I had to stop because it was too slippery, and if I fell off the edge, it would be all over, and it would be easy to fall off. So I decided to take my shoes off and walk barefoot. When my feet touched the snow, it was impossible. The coldness started from my feet and slowly climbed up my legs. My legs went numb. I couldn't walk. Then I saw Yen Chenqing. He was wearing a pair of straw sandals, and he had an extra pair. He couldn't stop walking, so he just threw the sandals to me and kept going. By then, the cold was already up to here. When it gets to your heart, you die. After I put on the straw sandals, I stamped my feet for a few minutes. And I could feel my legs again, and I could walk. I still have a photo of us. If it weren't for him, I'd have died in 35 in the snowy mountains.
Hundreds did die of cold, altitude sickness, and exhaustion. The shared hardships forged firm bonds between the soldiers and earned Mao unswerving loyalty.
Mao Zedong gave me his ration to eat. 3 little steamed buns in a little bowl this big. At first I didn't know that it was Mao's. In one bite, I ate 2 of them. When I found out it was his meal, I stopped eating. He said, "You must eat. You still have to march." He forced me to eat the last one. So Mao was very kind to his subordinates. He took good care of us.
The army now had to cross the grasslands. More people died here than on any other part of the march.
There was nothing there, absolutely nothing. As far as you could see, all there was marsh, the endless marsh. No trees, no houses, nothing. Stepping on the grass was like stepping on bean curd. It was soft. From time to time, someone stepped in the wrong spot and fell into the mud. If he fell in up to here, it was all over. When the mud was up to your chest, no one could save you. You could die at any second. You just couldn't tell.
We finally got hold of a newspaper and learned that there was a communist base in northern Shanxi province. It was only then that we decided to go there. We needed to rest and regroup. We knew it was extremely poor there, but we had nowhere else to go.
The communists reached Yan'an, the end of the Long March, in the fall of 1935. 95% of the Red Army had been lost.
But Mao didn't lose confidence. He asked us a question. Although there are now only 6,000 or 7,000 of us left, are we stronger or weaker than before? His answer was that we were stronger. He said the people who remained were gold.
Chiang Kai-shek had nearly wiped out the communists. But he faced another threat, a foreign threat, which many considered more dangerous than the communists: Japan. For years, Japan had had economic interests in North China and Manchuria. Throughout the 1920s, it expanded its interests and defended them with increasingly hostile military activity. Japan's aim was to colonize China. The Japanese posed the greatest threat to the warlord of the region, Zhang Shiliang. Zhang Shiliang was one of the most powerful men in China. He was the Generalissimo's second in command, and he retained his own huge, well-equipped army. In September 1931, the Japanese attacked Zhang Shiliang's troops.
We bore the brunt of the attack. The brigade commander gave orders. First, he telephoned me and asked me about the situation. Then he gave the order, "Don't resist. You are not permitted to resist." I pointed out that the enemy had already begun to attack. He said then, "Collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them in the storehouse." I said that there was no way I could collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them when the enemy was shelling us. He said, "Then why don't you withdraw?" I said, "I have only received an order to offer no resistance. I have no order to withdraw." He said, "It would be better if you withdraw. Otherwise, you will be held responsible." Then the phone was cut off.